Hi, my name is Casey Peterson, and my depth study is culture and politics, and so I decided to do my senior project on affordable housing. So I chose affordable housing not only because it relates to my depth study, but also because I plan to move back to the Bay Area after I graduate and hopefully get a job in either the nonprofit sector or for a county or city government. And affordable housing is a huge problem right now. Um, and I broke my project down into three different categories. So I looked at how the public sector is responding to the affordable housing crisis, how the nonprofit sector is responding to the crisis, and then what academia is saying about the crisis and the solutions that we currently have or don't have. And then my goal is to not only create a research paper at the end, but also create informational pamphlets that I can hand out to one, people in the community who are affected by affordable housing, so it would include resources and things like that, and then a pamphlet to hand out to people who are a part of the community but not affected by the affordable housing crisis, and it will hopefully have resources and tips for how to get involved. And so, what is affordable housing? So, affordable housing is considered affordable if it costs no more than 30% of a person's income. If you pay more than 30%, you are considered cost burdened. People who pay over 50% of their income on housing are considered severely cost burdened. And when we talk about affordable housing, we generally mean housing that's affordable to people with incomes at or below 80% of median income, which is AMI for short. And HUD and local and state programs usually use AMI to determine if you qualify for any of the programs that they offer. And so here's a chart of San Francisco's AMI. On the side, I've listed all of the important numbers. Obviously, you can pause this and go through and look at all the different variations, but you're considered extremely low income in San Francisco if you make 30% of AMI, which is $25,850 annually. And then the median income is $86,200, and a lot of programs, especially like homeowner programs, which is not what I focused on, but I thought it was interesting. A lot of times you can make up to 120 times or 120% of AMI and still qualify for programs. So this is the chart for Oakland's AMI. It's similar, but the numbers are a little bit different. Extremely low income is $26,040, and then the median income in the city of Oakland is $78,200. And all of these numbers that I've listed on the right side are for one person. It increases depending on how many people you have in your household. But the affordable housing crisis is a problem not only in Oakland and San Francisco, it's actually a nationwide problem. And so some interesting or disturbing, I guess, facts is that a total of 39 million households in the US can't afford the housing that they're currently living in. 1/3 of US households paid more than 30% of their income on housing in 2015. And I think it's only increased since then. More than 18 million households, or 1 in 6, are paying more than half of their income on housing. And then nationwide, there are only 21 units for every 100 households that make at or below the area median income. And so I actually pulled some data from the Urban Institute because they mapped America's rental housing crisis. So if you want to go see their interactive map, you can go to ads.urban.org, and this is where this is pulled from. But in San Francisco County, there was 41 units for every 100 extremely low-income renter households. So you can see that's a huge gap between the amount of people who qualify for those units and then the actual amount of units that they're able to offer. And so you can see here how many renter households or extremely low income renter households in San Francisco there are, how many adequate, affordable, and available units, and then what their income is. And then these are the statistics for Alameda County, which is the county that the city of Oakland is located in. There were 40 units for every 100 extremely low renter households, with 71,431 extremely low income renter households and only 28,231 units for them. So again, a huge gap. And then here is a picture of the interactive map that they created on the Urban Institute website. And I wanted to include this graphic because it's a really good visual of the affordable housing crisis in the US. You can see that all of the light blue, or in between blue, everything besides basically the really dark blue, means that there's a huge gap in the amount of people who are extremely low income renters and then the available units on the market for them. So I just thought this was a good visual representation. And then the effects of not having affordable housing. These range from health to financial security, accessibility issues. Basically, 10% of low-income renters live in units that lacked complete plumbing or kitchen facilities, experienced frequent breakdowns in major systems, or had to address other physical housing defects. So you can imagine if your house doesn't have plumbing, you probably can't wash your hands adequately, therefore maybe you might get sick more often, or maybe your apartment has mold growing in it and it gives you breathing problems like asthma, those types of things. It also affects people's mental health. They found that adults who are homeless or housing insecure are less likely to have goal-oriented thinking and more likely to experience psychological distress, substance abuse, intimate partner violence, or symptoms of trauma. So anxiety, depression, all those kinds of things you're way more likely to experience if you don't have access to affordable housing. It also affects financial security, because if you're a renter who's paying, even if as low as 30% all the way up to 80% of your income on your rent, it's really unlikely that you're going to be able to put away an adequate amount of money either towards retirement, any type of savings, including emergency funds, in case you lost your job in the future, anything like that. So it's really hard to be financially secure when you're paying that much of your total income towards rent. And then finally, there's accessibility issues related with a lack of access to affordable housing. If you don't have access to a stable, affordable place to live, you oftentimes also lack access to things like necessary job training, higher education, things like stable daycare, or even consistent medical treatment if you have a chronic illness or something that you need to be treated for consistently. A lot of times you lack access to that if you're constantly moving around or just simply don't have a place to live in general. And so then moving into how the public sector deals with the affordable housing crisis. So like I said, I looked at the city of San Francisco and the city of Oakland, and both cities offer these 4 programs that are listed. So the first one, inclusionary housing or below market rate programs. So basically these are owners of certain private or for-profit rental housing set aside some apartments in their buildings and charge rents for these units that are below the market rate. So actually in both of these cities, any real estate developer that builds any new building must include below market rate units in those, or they have to pay a fine. They also have nonprofit affordable rental housing programs where basically private or nonprofit corporations receive financial funding or financing from the city to help create buildings that are completely dedicated to affordable rental housing. So all the units in those buildings are affordable, unlike the BMR rental programs. There's also public housing when public housing was created, the goal was to provide decent, safe, sanitary, drug-free housing. That isn't always the case with public housing because it's traditionally underfunded, but the program is operated locally even though it's funded through the federal housing program. So that's still offered today. And then there's also Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher programs, and this is basically when you make a certain level of AMI, you qualify for a voucher, and then you can take that voucher to help subsidize your rent when you have to find rent in the private market. But there's a lot of problems that come with this, and one of them is that a lot of landlords do not accept housing vouchers because either people in that building or in that community don't want low-income renters in their community. One program that the City of Oakland offers that the City of San Francisco does not offer is Project-Based Housing Voucher Program. And this program, tenants who reside in units using this program have rent subsidized similar to those using the Section 8 vouchers, but in this program, the voucher is tied to the unit, not the resident. So if the resident moves to a different unit, they do not get that voucher anymore. And then the private sector, which is basically nonprofits. Nonprofits play a huge role in the affordable housing crisis. For the presentation, I chose just to show the East Bay Housing Organization. And this is a list of the programs that they offer, so statewide organizing, so things like advocacy, education programs, policy changes, things like that, lobbying. They also have committees like the Resident and Community Organizing Program Committee, which basically works to empower the residents who are receiving affordable housing programs to be active in the decisions that actually affect them. But nonprofits really fill the gap between what people can afford and then what the city can offer them through different programs. They aim to fill that gap. And then finally, academia. So I chose to include two specific articles. The first one is written by Matthew Palm and Deb Meanier, and it's titled Achieving Regional Housing Planning Objectives, Directing Affordable Housing to Jobs-Rich Neighborhoods in the San Francisco Bay Area. And this article found that more mandated affordable housing units were built in job-rich neighborhoods after the Association of Bay Area Governments, or they're also known as ABAG, their policy change than before that. And basically, regions and localities that directing affordable housing to job-rich neighborhoods can simultaneously address the housing crisis, but also employment and transportation barriers that face a lot of these low-income households. And there's three main ways that states have attempted to address the barriers to affordable housing created by exclusionary zoning, which this article talks about. And the first one is the state sets statewide goals for each city or region, which is typically 10%, with some way for developers to appeal local regulatory decisions that negatively affect the development of affordable housing. The second option is that states enact a fair share mandate, requiring local governments to provide a portion of the needed affordable housing in their region. And then the third is that states require localities to include a housing element or chapter in the local comprehensive master plan that focuses directly on affordable housing. And basically, this article found that results suggested a positive association between the ABAG's allocation policy shift and the production of new affordable housing units. And I don't know if I mentioned this but in enough detail, but basically in the Bay Area, they made a policy change that instead of requiring each region or city to take on a certain percentage of the overall goal of affordable housing, they made it so that areas that had more job opportunities and more job rich had to take on a greater portion of those affordable housing units that they wanted to develop. And so not all of California does this, it's just the Bay Area. But they found that this policy shift was associated with a 104% improvement in the balance of housing and jobs at the local level. And the authors actually suggest that planners and policymakers in California need stronger local housing incentives and penalties within the housing allocation framework, and that locating affordable housing near employment opportunities and jobs clearly provides meaningful benefits to lower income households. So overall, they found that it was very beneficial. And then the second article, titled No Place Like Home, Defining HUD's Role in the Affordable Housing Crisis, basically details HUD's history and how it was created in 1965, but in the past decades, HUD's really taken a hands-off approach, and they argue that the current structure is really outdated and incapable of keeping up with the expanding affordable housing stock, or lack thereof. So they're not able to keep up with demand, basically. And they argue that HUD can no longer take this kind of hands-off approach while state and local knowledge ensures success for projects federally funded, and it's necessary to get local projects off the ground. So basically, this article argues that HUD should repurpose the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing program to use towards affordable housing instead of fair housing. And so basically the role that HUD's playing now is not enough, and that if they revamped that a program to apply to affordable housing, it would create a stronger and more meaningful partnership between HUD and local governments, leaving the local governments to create specific programs and solutions for their communities, while HUD provides support, data, and accountability for them to actually achieve that, instead of just the funding that they provide now. So that's kind of an overview of my senior project. It's a very brief overview, but there is a lot of material and research in this topic, so I hope that gave you some idea of what my research paper will look like. Thanks.